Google shutting down Stadia. But it's not all bad news. The rumors and speculation and honestly just the general observations of Stadia are all coming true today as Google has officially announced that the company will be shutting down Stadia. Now, this is a very big bombshell in the world of gaming, and it's not all bad news if you bought into the service. So Google posted up an official statement here, and let's just dive into it because there's quite a bit to digest. So the company starts off by saying for many years, Google has invested across multiple aspects of the gaming industry, and they really hype up how they have helped broaden the horizon of games and who can be a gamer and where games can reach. But they said a few years ago, starting in the second paragraph, we also launched a consumer gaming service, Stadia. And while Stadia's approach to streaming games for consumers was built on a strong technology foundation, it hasn't gained the traction with users that we expected, so we've made the difficult decision to begin winding down our Stadia streaming service. They go on to say, we're grateful to the dedicated Stadia players that have been with us from the start. We will be refunding, this is key, we will be refunding all Stadia hardware purchases made through the Google Store and all game and add-on content purchases made through the Stadia Store too. Players will continue to have access to their game library and play through January of 2023 so they can complete final play sessions. And we expect to have the majority of refunds completed by mid-January of 2023. We will have more details for players on this process over on their help center. So that, in a nutshell, is a very big deal. Google is shutting down their Stadia service. But more importantly, for people like myself who bought into Stadia, I bought the package that came with this controller and the Chromecast, and I bought a game or two, that you will be getting actual refunds. So this tells us a couple things. One, Google is taking a pretty big sizable financial hit, we assume. I assume that they're taking a big financial hit because, well, they're refunding all this. That is, unless they didn't really actually sell too many of these controllers and this setup never really caught on, as they alluded to in their own statement. Now, the reality here is that we've all known that Google Stadia, which had a pretty interesting launch trailer. I've sort of spliced it up here so that you can take a look at how they actually announced Stadia. Has had a pretty rough ride. I mean, Google, let's be honest, has a pretty rich history of killing products. And as soon as Google Stadia was announced, everyone's like, hey, is this the next thing that Google's going to say is their future? And then a couple of years later, they're just going to kill it, which is exactly what happened. And it really just layers on the fact that you got to be careful when you start buying into the Google infrastructure because they tend to not hold on to things if they don't catch fire right away. All that being said, Google's model for Stadia was not always that great. You had to buy content directly through them. It wasn't portable outside of the service. And if the service ever shuts down like it does today, or like it is today, I should say, then you're out of your games. Thankfully, Google is making the very good decision to refund it because you could imagine how much of a headache this would have been if they said, nope, we're not going to refund everybody. There would have been lots of lawsuits, I suspect, related to that. Now, a player like Google leaving the gaming streaming world is honestly, in my opinion, not necessarily a good thing. We all know what Microsoft is trying to do right now. They're trying to buy Activision Blizzard, and that's going to cost them about $70 billion dues, which is a big acquisition. Of course, Sony's on the other side of that saying, look, we can't, they shouldn't be allowed to do this with Call of Duty. I'm not quite sure yet how this plays into that narrative, because on one hand, Microsoft could be like, look, even Google can't crack into this. This is a ridiculous market. We need all the help that we can get. We are the third player in the industry, and so we need help to be able to compete with the top tier players like Sony and Nintendo. And that could be Microsoft's argument, but on the other side, Sony could very likely come out and say, look, Stadia cannot thrive. They can't thrive with locked content, and so by putting Activision Blizzard content inside of the world of Microsoft, Stadia can't even make it as well. So if Google can't go to market, how are new players supposed to come on board with more content being locked up behind exclusivity or just being owned by a potential competitor? So that is one interesting lens about it. Now, Google, for its part, had been broadcasting that they were looking to cut some expenses. Their CEO, Sundar, had said, hey, look, if it's not priority stuff, we're probably going to be making some moves here. And it looks like Stadia definitely fell into that bucket, that they are no longer going to be supporting it. Now, all this being said, Stadia's back-end technology is actually quite impressive. I think their business model is honestly just what killed them here, is that it didn't make a lot of sense how they were trying to bring games. But as we all know, having hardware or a service like Stadia doesn't matter if you don't have the content. The content is king, and it will always be king. And I think that's where Stadia started to fall short. It wasn't a surprise. Remember that they had a gaming studio internally, and they moved away from that. They shut that that down. And so that was really where things started to get broadcasted that Stadia wasn't maybe in a healthy state. So they stopped developing their own titles, which would have been the drive to Stadia. And then now here we are not too long afterwards and them saying we're shutting it down. So really, what is the future of Stadia? Well, the Stadia brand, I suspect, is going away, but we've already seen Google ink deals with like AT&T to do basically the back-end infrastructure work, which is realistically probably a much easier sell and where the money is going to be made. Microsoft is also trying to get into this. But we also can't forget about other services like Luna. Amazon is trying to get into the same space with Luna. I have very little idea about how well it is doing. We're also seeing Netflix trying to go into the gaming route. So there are more entrants trying to come in, but Google is now gracefully bowing out, although they do point out it's like, hey, look, we got games in the Android store. We're a streamer platform with YouTube, and they do make very good arguments on that front. The question becomes, what happens next? Obviously, Google is going to start refunding this. How does Google recover from something like this if they ever try to come back into the market with another big product? I think that's the biggest hit for Google here, is that the legacy of the company just abandoning things like Google Circle, Google Wave, there's Reader, there's tons of things that go on. Basically, it seems like the only thing that survived lately is Google Mail, or Gmail, I should say, and obviously YouTube, which they acquired at the end of the day. Is Google now, that perception that they just kill products after a couple of years really gets amplified. But what are you going to do if the business unit is not making money and Google truly can't see a viable future for Stadia? It is, in theory, the right thing to do. And Google doesn't want to limp this service along and keep taking consumers' money, knowing that they're likely going to have to refund it, which is the route that they have gone. Now, Google is winding this down fairly quickly. If you look at it, it says you can play through January 18th of 2023, and all refunds will be completed by mid of January 2023. That's only like 3-4 months from now. That's not that long of a window for the company to officially wind this service down and to begin to move on what's next. Now, I'll be very curious to see if Google would be willing to work with a company like Amazon and do a Luna streaming service that integrates with YouTube. Same with Xbox, because remember, the big deal about Stadia, and something they never really materialized from their initial marketing, was that, hey, you could search a title such as Call of Duty Warzone, and then you could click a link and instantly be streaming that game and start playing it directly in your browser through a search engine. That product workflow never really materialized in any sort of meaningful way. It was also intended to be that, hey, if you're a streamer on YouTube and you're playing a game, you can put a link down below in the description, and then you click that link and then your user joins with you. And that stuff never really materialized. The question becomes is, will Google ever partner with somebody like Microsoft? I suspect that they probably won't. Amazon maybe, but again, these guys are all cloud juggernauts and that's where they want to compete. And so inking up those relationships makes things feel a little bit dicey. So Stadia is officially done. We all figured this day was coming. And so the good news is, if you're like me and you bought into it, you're going to get a refund. But now the question becomes, how does this impact the rest of the streaming community? As of right now, we don't have a great idea, but we'll have to keep our eyes and ears peeled to see what happens. And if you want to see what happens next in the world of Xbox and Microsoft and everywhere else beyond, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because the only BS on this channel is me.